Alright guys, now that we have this 5600G mini ITX gaming PC all booted up and ready to go, let's talk about a couple benchmarks real quick. Now we decided to test this PC in a couple of titles, those being Splitgate, Apex Legends, Forza Horizon 4, and Borderlands 3. Now before we dive into the benchmarks, I actually did a little bit of an overclock on this APU, boosting the GPU up to 2300 MHz on 1.2 volts, and then let the CPU boost on its own based on its cooling, ability with the stock cooler. For the most part, you can get a slight overclock on the iGPU very easily, even with the stock Wraith cooler, as you can see right here. And as you've seen the benchmarks, the temperature stayed pretty solid, and there were no crashes whatsoever. So if you want to overclock your 5600G, very easy to do. Go into the BIOS, go under the overclocking setting, and change the iGPU overclock to 2300 MHz and the volts to 1.2, and you're good to go. Now, of course, if you do experience some instability, you might have to dial back that overclock a little bit, but for the most part, I've seen this being easily replicable for anyone who wants to get a very mild overclock and just get some free performance from these APUs. And as you can see in Splitgate, a game that is pretty popular right now in the esports community, at 1080p on medium settings, we averaged 80 plus FPS most of the time. Splitgate's a pretty easy game to run. It's kind of in the same ballpark of like a Valorant, so kind of expect to get some results in games like Valorant and Fortnite on lower settings. 60 plus FPS, no problem whatsoever. League of Legends, of course, is another game that you would have no problems with this APU. But really, for a placeholder option, if you're somebody looking to play these esports titles that are just, well, the ones that are not available on other consoles and stuff, and maybe you want to upgrade to a high-end gaming rig in the future, I really think that's where the 5600G and 5700G have their place in the market, because they're better overall CPUs compared to the 3200G and 3400G. That was the main argument going against APUs, is because the actual CPU wasn't nearly as powerful as just saving up your money and getting a better overall CPU and then adding a graphics card at the same time of purchase. But now you can get an APU that will work really well right now and have a very powerful CPU to work very well with any sort of GPU you throw at it. I could easily see you throwing a 3060 or 3070 with the 5600G and double if not triple your performance just by adding that graphics card. Now next up in Apex Legends, you have to run at 1600 by 900 on low settings. In arenas mode, you do get 50 to 60 FPS. Really, these APUs in like more graphically demanding games are more of a 1600 by 900 or 720p gaming system. You're probably going to be getting 50 to 60 FPS, and you're going to have some dips here and there. I was able to play Apex and enjoy it, but if you're a really competitive Apex gamer, it's really not going to be an awesome experience. It'll work, but you are going to run on 720p low settings to get a constant 60 FPS, and it's really hard to spot enemies in the distance when running that low of a resolution. So just keep in mind that it's something you have to deal with. One thing you could do is pick up an older 720p monitor, which would work better because you're running at native resolution. You can actually see things a little bit better than downscaling from, let's say, a 1080p monitor. If you really think you're going to be holding onto the system for a while, that could be a decent investment on like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, because a lot of people overlook the fact that if you get some 720p native monitors, while be it they're not the greatest looking monitors, it will allow you to get better FPS and have just a better gaming experience when playing on lower resolutions. Next up, in Forza Horizon 4, using the built-in benchmark on medium settings at 1080p, we ended up averaging 50 FPS. Forza games are perfectly fine running at 30 plus FPS, because on consoles, for the most part, they were running on 30 FPS. Nowadays, consoles are running at 60, but if you get 50 to 60 FPS, you're going to have a great experience playing racing games. Another thing that's really cool with these APUs is emulation. If you're someone wanting to play older, like Wii games or Game Boy games, like I used to emulate Pokemon all the time on my PC. It's absolutely fun. You can emulate a lot of older console games on a 5600G with no problems whatsoever. If you guys are interested in seeing us do an emulation system, let us know down below. This is something I've been considering diving into, but I'm not really sure how interested you all will be. If there's a comment down there that gets a bunch of thumbs up, maybe we'll consider doing it, but I think the 5600G is very good for that use case as well. And last but certainly not least, a AAA title that, well, is going to show how weak the 5600G is in AAA titles, Borderlands 3 at 720p on medium settings using the built-in benchmark. We only averaged 47 FPS. In recap, the 5600G has its limitations. In AAA titles, you're going to get better performance with the 5700G because it has very slightly better Vega graphics and also more cores, but the 5600G is decently cheaper, making it a better value for money option if you are just playing esports titles. So I do mainly recommend going with the 5600G, especially because it has 6 cores and 12 threads that compare very well to a 5600X, and with a GPU, it's going to be an an awesome gaming rig that will pretty much crush the competition to play anything you want, no problems whatsoever. So if you're tired of waiting and want to get into PC gaming now and enjoy all the awesome esports titles and lower end titles that are available to you, especially emulation, indie games, all that sort of fun stuff, don't hesitate. Pick up a 5600G, get a decent power supply, and you have a pretty awesome system. Now, I really do like the case we used here, the NR200P, but I'll be totally honest with you, the fans we ended up using, the cables were so long that cable management was a nightmare in this thing, and I probably would have just used the other side panel instead of the clear side panel, but I really do like the look of this case. If I ever went mini ITX, I'd probably lean this case, but for the most part, it was fun building in it. I like doing these super compact builds when we can, and yeah, if you want to pick up any of the parts from today's video, the link in the description down below will be affiliate links and it will help us out, but how about we bring Jackson back in here to wrap this video up real quick.